Hey everyone. So I have just 7 things that I want to explore today. Not six, not eight, not 10, not two, but 7 habits of what I think of as highly effective culture shapers. Uh, I think of management and leadership, and this talk is not focused on management. This talk is focused on leaders, and I think a leader's responsibility, I'd like to hold leaders accountable and responsible and to be mindful of the role that they play in shaping the culture around them organizationally. And we're going to talk about 7 habits or patterns related to that. It's not exhaustive, but it's 7 that I think are really crucial for leaders to be mindful of and aware of, and to be operating their behaviors around. Leaders go first, storytelling, trust, creating this notion of creating space, curiosity. I'll explain what the toleration gap is, or the tolerate gap, and then we'll end with walking your talk. So let's dive in. So leaders go first. Uh, it's called leadership. I love this. We call them leaders because they go first, because they take the risk before anyone else does, because they will choose to sacrifice so that people will be safe and protected. In agile context, I find so many leaders have a team first mindset. They'll get some training for their teams. They'll cobble teams together. They say go Scrum or go Kanban or go Agile. And then it's almost stepping back and saying, I've done my part. The teams are out there charging and learning agility. Very often as part of that paradigm, they are hiring coaches to come in and coach the teams. That's not necessarily terrible or bad, but I don't think it's best. I actually think the best way to lead a transformation is for the leaders to go first. They're setting the tone. They're doing personal training, and they're getting coaching for themselves. So I wish more leaders would do some training, and I'm not talking about 1 hour of training or 30 minutes. I'm a busy leader, so I only have 30 minutes. Teach me everything about Agile in 30 minutes. I'm not talking about that kind of superficial training. I'm talking about really being curious and looking at the first steps of agility is at the leadership level in an organization. They establish a vision and a why and high level goals. And they focus on what is their transformation? What is my transformation necessary at an organizational culture perspective? So I think the first pattern is leaders leaning into, we need to go first. We can't tell the teams to do things. We can actually show them what agility looks like. Gosh, that's a much more powerful shift, I think, for leaders to adopt. A part of that shift is personally engaging agility. So instead of telling people to go agile, show them what it looks like. So practice agile techniques. At a leadership level, establish a Scrum team, do stand-ups, apply transparency, have information radiators for leadership initiatives and strategic initiatives at an organizational level. Uh, be clear on your priority and focus, and collaborate, align. One of the primary issues or challenges in a lot of organizations is leadership silos are not aligned. They're not horizontally aligned very well. And part of this personally engaging agility would be, imagine a Scrum team where each individual is only working on their silo and they weren't working together as a team. So establish that at a leadership level and really focus on that. Another part of leaders go first to me is measuring the coachability of the leaders, measuring, and that's a little tongue in cheek, but are they coachable? Are they curious? Are they inquisitive? Are they becoming a student of agility, where they know that what they know and they know what they don't know, and they're practicing continuous curiosity and continuous learning and continuous growth and development at a leadership level. Um, and really embracing coachability, getting coaches for themselves, whether that's an internal coach or mentor or an external coach. I don't care. It's not a revenue point of view from my perspective. It's a growth perspective. You're leading with yourself. So that's that inside out view. I didn't say it, but I want to encourage questions along the way, and I'll try to address them. So I'm watching. Susan and I will be watching the Q&A box. So if you have If I inspire some questions or clarifications or whatnot, just throw them in there and we'll try to address them along the way. Okay. Um, I love jobs in some of these, in some of my leadership exercises and workshops that I do. Um, and he talks about the most powerful person in the world. In this case, the quote is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. And so part of this visionator, I think leaders go first. Part of that and an extension of that is leaders need to become storytellers to share the vision. It's not just a PowerPoint slide, it's not just a slogan. I mean, you can approach it that way, but you really want to be telling those stories, connecting the dots from the leader's vision down to each individual to the best of your ability in the organization. And that connects to the second pattern of how are we shaping the culture. And I really want to inspire leaders. And again, I'm focusing on leaders, managers as well. So if there's managers listening in, this applies to you. You have a leadership hat uh, sometimes. So I want you to lean into that leadership hat. But share your intentions for Agile by sharing challenge stories. Share the why. I have a view. When I talk about storytelling to leaders, many leaders have this feeling like they can tell something, they communicate once, they tell something once, and once is good enough, or twice is good enough. And I have the view that you're not done telling a story to your organization until other people pick up your story. I want everyone to write this down. This You're not done with a story on the why until you hear other people in the organization, leaders and team members sharing your story for you. And when you hear that, you're like, you should smile to yourself. Now I'm approaching done. Now I can shift my story to another story. Maybe it's a vision, maybe it's a strategy, maybe it's something else maybe it's a corrective action we need to apply. So you want to sort of talk in terms of paint a vision in your storytelling, like the goal. What does done look like? And be a bit sort of poetic in describing it. This is Create that vision of what's going on. Uh, not just talk about success, talk about failures, talk about mistakes that you've made. Talk about mistakes, and then that's part of the why. Why are we shifting? What are some of the problems we've had? What is my vision for the future? So really, I think in terms of become a whyinator, like really share the why. And why is not just a high level why. Like at a team level, I was working with a bunch of team level scrum masters just a few days ago, and I was asking them, what is the why at a team level? What is the purpose of the team? What is your team trying to strive for? And many of them didn't have that. And it's not a why to get stories done. Like our why is to get 20 points worth of stories done per sprint. That's a why, but it's not a very compelling why. It's a very tactical why. It's not very vision oriented. It doesn't get me up in the morning and get it. The storytelling and the whys of culture shaping should generate energy in your organization. To be something that gets people excited about your purpose in life. And it's at a leadership level, it's at a mid-tier level, it's at an individual team level. You should be able to see this alignment in the whys going on. A third, remember, we're almost halfway through, so I'm cruising through. I'm cruising through these things. So trust is something that I think is incredibly important, and I couch this as trust till it hurts. When I engage leaders individually or in groups in companies, or I engage them in training workshops, I always ask, or presentations like this, I always ask people, do you trust your team? And I'm trying to establish a baseline understanding. And probably 99% of the time, people were like, of course I trust my team. I'm because to say I distrust my team would be too vulnerable and it would be too negative to most people. But then if we start digging into it, the superficial answer is, of course, I trust my team. But that's the words. When you look underneath it and you look at the behaviors, then the behaviors have to align with that, with what you say. And a lot of folks are behaving in ways that do not echo to the team that I trust the team. Trust but verify. I want to just bring up to everyone that notion of a trust but verify model. So I trust you, but I need to verify your work products. I trust you, but I need to sit down with you 3 times a day and look at the code you're producing. That's not a trustful model. That's a distrustful model. Uh, Trust but verify was never trustful, and it doesn't feel that way on the receiving side of it. What I'm talking about is extending trust, trust to this team to solve their own problems, to face their challenges, give them a goal, give them a mission, give them the why, give your organization that, give your teams that, and then step back and let them figure out what to do. If they need your help, they'll ask for help. So you want to extend as much trust. I talk about extending it till it hurts, and then extending it some more. That's true trust. Uh, Empowerment. Empower the teams. Even if you don't, you suspect that they may be making a mistake or they may fail. Trust them. If they need you, they will ask you for it. That's that extension. Stephen M.R. Covey wrote a book, The Speed of Trust, 13 Patterns. And he talks in there, one of those patterns is extending trust. And I'm really sort of amplifying that. And a lot of us don't extend trust enough. We don't trust enough. I'm not saying you're bad. I'm not saying you're distrustful, but we need to, as leaders, we need to, if we want to create this empowered organization, we're communicating the why, we're storytelling, but then we have to activate it by extending that trust. One of the sort of metaphors or models to amplify that point is the Five Dysfunctions. Has this Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Lencioni. And if you haven't read the book, I would highly recommend reading the book. It's a quick read. It's in the form of a fable. It's sort of a dated. It's been around for a while. Uh, and but quick read, and it talks about team, like high performing teams. What I think of as, what does it take, or what are the dynamics of creating a high performance team? And a lot of folks, when they talk about high performance teams, they focus on results, accountability, and commitments. So from Lencioni's point of view, the higher end of the pyramid, the tip of the pyramid. But I want to amplify, in order to get those things, to get results, to gain accountability, to gain commitment on the part of the teams or your organization, the baseline is an absence of trust. And we want to amplify that trust. That's the foundation for high performance from my point of view. And then the next level up, if we have that trust at the team level, then we're not afraid to have conflict. And I want you to translate conflict in this term to change the definition, to be the passionate debate about the things that truly matter. So it's not conflict for conflict's sake. It's not negative conflict. We're just having passionate debate, not about everything. There's a mistake, I think, a lot of folks, particularly in my experience with software teams, there's passionate debate about everything. And that, I don't think that's a mark of high performance teams. So there's no passionate debate because everyone's just checking the box and following the leader. Well, that's a trust problem. We don't have enough trust. There's distrust. And then there's debate about everything. That's dysfunctional as well. But there's this, if things are crucial design decisions, crucial priorities, crucial customers to solve, to deliver things to, that's where we need that debate. And there's that balance. But we need the trust in order to do that, to weigh in and tell my boss that's a mistake. My opinion, we need to not take that approach. We need to complement that strategy with this thing, and hearing that from your team. I don't know if I'm seeing questions or not. I'm seeing no questions now. So Susan, I don't know if that's correct or not, but if I'm missing questions, if you want to interrupt me, you feel free if you're seeing questions come in.
There is one. What if you trust that has been earned but then got burned?
So I think it's figured out what the root cause of that is. So it could be burned that someone is distrustful. So I'm going to say this in a tongue-in-cheek way. Uh, Hire good people and then extend trust to them. If you've hired bad people, most people don't do that. But if there's an outlier, well, then you probably want to terminate them or find another role for them. But the good ones, the ones that are higher performing, then extend trust to them and realize that they may make mistakes, and that's normal. That's okay. They may fail. There's learning there. So extend that. So if you've gotten burned, I'd say ask the question of what are the root dynamics of it? Is it an underperforming person? Or is it a normal cause of events? Or was it did someone, for example, take on a very challenging task and fail at it? I might not, I might argue in that case, don't remove the trust, applaud them in an all hands meeting for having the courage to take something on that was truly sort of courageous. Applaud that courage. So it depends, is my point. But don't be so quick to remove it, would be one of my answers. Don't be so, oh, I gave it to you and then you lost it immediately. Extend it until it hurts and keep it out there in play. But if there's malicious intent or things or underperformance going on, then respond accordingly. We're very good at taking it away, so be cautious about that, particularly with your high-performing teams or teams that are encountering other things. Good question. Thank you for that. Create space is another pattern. A way of shaping the culture is giving the team space, creating the space. And this can be really challenging. So create space for innovation, create space for creativity. If any of you have ever heard of things like hackathons, or Google years ago had something called 20% time. And they would plan capacity at 80% and they would give the teams 20% of the time, 1 day a week, as an example. They would give them that for the team to learn, to read a book, to apply, to creatively solve a problem, to experiment and to learn, etc., and to grow that way. Now, the bad news is they withdrew that over time, unfortunately. But for a while, some of the core products that were coming out of Google, what the ideation was coming from this, creating space for that. Create space for fun and joy. If you're riding your teams at 120% capacity, there's no time for thinking. There's no time for joy. There's very little time for joy. There's no time for reading. There's no time for reflecting on two options. For diversity and inclusion, very often create space so that maybe an inexperienced engineer can take on a task that normally would go to a subject matter expert, because all we care about is the fastest person that can implement that, but we're not growing the other team members around them. So what can we do to create space for growth, for diversity, for inclusion, for all voices, for reinventing ourselves? How about for self-care? Like giving people a little bit of space for self-care, and then to change. I think one of the probably the biggest problems in today's agile transformations is it is a change. It's not just an organizational change. It's not just a leadership change, but it's an individual change. It changes the roles and responsibility for everyone in the organization. It's disruptive. It disrupts your job. It disrupts your understanding of how do I operate my job, particularly at the management level. And I think we need to give those folks space to change themselves. And it's really hard to change my mind, to change my style, to change my experience, to change my default mode of operating if I'm running at 120%. Another way of saying that is running back-to-back meetings. I just was talking to someone, I think it was yesterday, and there was this badge of courage that I'm triple booked, I'm double booked, I'm running from back to back to back to back to back to back meetings. Look how busy I am. Look how great. They were actually tired, but imagine working in an environment like that. There's no space for breathing, for much in the way of thinking. And then look at the impact that that's having. What if we drop that? And that's self-imposed. We can drop that. So creating space. There's two wonderful, I wrote them. I don't know if they're wonderful, but there's two blog posts on this slide that I really want you to read. One is in managing capacity, and the other is in ideas for creating space. And I think that's an important idea as part of the culture shaping that you can do. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. A part of creating space is creating safety. Probably most of the folks dialed in are aware of Project Aristotle. It's a Google study. I'm just going to repeat it quickly. It was done a few years ago. I think it's like a 12-month to 18-month project from HR's perspective in Google. The way I couch it is internally, Google was trying, the leadership team and human resources was trying to figure out what is our secret sauce. So if you buy into the case that Google doesn't have perfect organization or perfect teams, but they have pretty relatively high performance teams that are, sort of from Lencioni's model, they're really accountable, they're really driving results. Well, then what's the secret sauce for that? What's the recipe that creates that? And they weren't asking it from the leader's perspective, they were asking it from the team's perspective, and they were surveying the teams. And this is the top 5 areas that came back from Project Aristotle. And I'm just going to focus on the first one, psychological safety. That was the number one factor from a team's point of view that said we are high performance teams, and this is the primary driving factor. And the way they defined it is team members feel safe to take risks and to be vulnerable in front of each other. And the reason I'm bringing it up in the space is we need to create space for psychological safety, or at least that's what I'm, from a culture shaping perspective, that's what I'm alluding to. I'm highly recommending that you're doing that you be cognizant of and intentional about thinking about psychological safety. Now, I want to add a little bit of nuance to what does that mean. And Tim Clark wrote a book. The link is on that slide. He wrote a book and he created about psychological safety, and he created a 4-quadrant model, which dives underneath what Google was talking about, and it adds some nuance and some flavor. And he has 4 quadrants. He talks about learner safety. Is it safe to learn? Is it safe, for example, to ask for help or to say I don't know, or to fail or to take risks? And you saw that in Google. So what Google was talking about was psychological safety. Learner quadrant was part of that. There's another quadrant, challenger safety. Is it safe to question the status quo and staid practices? You didn't hear that so much in Google's sense, but in general, psychological safety, challenger safety is something that's very unique, and you see that as being a problem in many organizations. Collaborator safety, again, you didn't see this referenced in the definition from Google, but in Tim's view, the collaborator quadrant is: can you chat? Is there open communication? Is it a flat organization from making recommendations, from giving feedback perspective in a 360 fashion? Can you have that constructive debate and feedback? Remember back to the 5 dysfunctions. Can I have that passionate debate? Is it safe to have that passionate debate? Or do people view it that, if I raise my voice, or if I raise a different opinion, I'm going to pay a penalty for that, or I might get terminated, or I might get written up, or whatever the terminology is in the company. And then there's inclusion safety. Are we listening to all voices? Is everyone part of the team? Are we respecting all voices? Deep democracy would be another way to say that. And titles are less important than hearing all voices at a team level. So I just thought I'd share that, again, from a leadership culture shaping perspective. The reason, if you're counting slides, I had 3 slides here on this, and I think psychological safety is really important for you to extend it, or to create an environment for that in your ecosystem to the degree that you can. Curiosity is another pattern that I want to talk about. I want you to activate your inner. I had to get Yoda in here. It's almost mandatory in my presentation. So I want you to activate your mind of a child as a leader. I want you to activate curiosity. So I want you to move from telling, if you're a prescriptive leader, if you're a command and control leader, I'll use that terminology. If that's a common stance for you, I'm recommending that you lessen that in your culture shaping, and you amplify. Well, what do I do? How do I figure out what's going on? You activate your inner Yoda. You activate your curiosity. You're asking open-ended questions. You seek to understand. You explore possibilities. You extend trust. Part of extending trust, it's extend trust, but that doesn't stop you from asking questions. That shouldn't stop you from asking questions or seeking to understand. Lowering resistance. Assuming, part of curiosity is assuming positive intent. Remember, we were talking about, something blew up. Well, assume positive intent on the person. Someone made a mistake. Oh, I don't know if I can trust them. Well, that's assuming negative intent. Maybe assume positive intent. Maybe there were some external factors that involved that. Maybe they're having some issues at home. Maybe they had a bad day or whatever. Is that really a reason to withdraw trust? Well, what if we enter with assuming positive intent or API and then challenging assumptions, going in with that fair and balanced curiosity? But when you're doing that and you're asking all of those questions, then you want to have the powerful listening. Then listen. A lot of people ask 1,000 questions, but they're not listening. They're listening. Did I hear something that was the way I would do it? Right? You're looking to validate. You're looking. It's trust but verify. You're looking for verification. Put it on that mind of a child, that curiosity. Why? Why are we doing it? This is the land of the five whys, if you've ever heard that as a facilitation technique. So activating your curiosity would be a five whys activation. And then powerfully listen. Don't wait to talk. Look at comprehension. We have two more patterns or culture shaping sort of observations that I want to influence you to think about. So this is the sixth one. I talked about the toleration gap. Let me describe it this way. The gentleman in that picture is Jürgen Appello. He wrote a book called Management 3.0. And in it, I'll read it for you because it's probably too small on your screen. It says that slide is saying the culture of any organization is shaped by the best behavior the leader is willing to amplify. I want everyone to sort of jot that down, and I'll repeat it. The culture of any organization is shaped by the best behavior the leader is willing to amplify. In my picture, that's the green bar. That's the best behavior you're willing to amplify or reward, or that you amplify or reward, like leaders or you personally or both. I want to go to a corollary of that. So the corollary is the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that your leaders tolerate or that you tolerate. Again, I'll repeat that. The culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that your leaders tolerate or that you tolerate. That's the red bar. I assert that culture, as we're shaping it as leaders, we're significant. We play a significant part in shaping the culture. I don't think you buy it. I think it's shaped in our micro moves, in our micro exchanges, in our day-to-day tactical exchanges with our team, our behavior. I think the gap between green and red is that's where your culture lives. Now, my assertion is I think that we tolerate too much. So let me give you an example. We're going agile and we're doing an agile transformation. And we have some subject matter experts who have been with the company forever and they're embedded in the teams. And they really are curmudgeons and they're really not buying this collaborative kumbaya. We're going to work together as a team to deliver results. They know a lot. They've been around a lot. They're not bad people. They're just not changing. They're not buying this team collaboration model. And they're undermining it in the teams. They're taking all of the work and they're doing a lot of the work, or they're driving the decision making. And a lot of members of the teams are sort of silent. You see it. And there's, a team lead who's driving most of the results. And the leaders around those subject matter experts are tolerating that. On the one hand, they're saying, we're going agile, cross-functional teams, all voices matter. But on the other hand, their behavior is not confronting those subject matter experts, not confronting that behavior. So by tolerating that, you're making that part of the landscape. Oh, we're going agile, but you know what? Only when it's comfortable. Otherwise, the Bob Galen, who's a curmudgeonly subject matter expert or team lead, he's allowed to drive that team and to decide what's going on. It's an exception in there. Or daily stand up and people show up late and we tolerate lateness and we actually catch people up in the daily stand up. That becomes part of our culture. Hey, it doesn't matter to be on time. Third example, we're having meetings, we're doing backlog refinement. And when some individuals are talking, we all listen. And when other individuals are talking, we roll our eyes and we make noises and we don't really respect them. And no one confronts those folks who are the eye rollers and the folks that are listening to some but not listening to others, not open to new ideas, not open to challenging the status quo, then that's part of our culture. Hey, we're not we're going to say that we're agile and we respect all voices, but we're not going to really behave that way. What I'm trying to allude to is, as culture shapers, I think there's too much toleration in the world. Toleration of things that don't align with our principles, don't align with our words. And I want to encourage leaders to be cognizant of that and narrow that gap. That's my point. Manage the toleration gap in your culture shaping. What I would really challenge everyone, I think my supposition is we tolerate too much crap, too much misalignment with what the principles are that we espouse in the real world, and we provide excuses for it. Let's stop doing some of that. Let's start narrowing that gap. One way to actually activate that, another Lencioni quote, he wrote the book called The Advantage, and he talks about the first team. And the first team is not a vertical, it's a horizontal leadership team. And one way to gain traction on the toleration gap is for the leadership team to call that behavior out amongst themselves and to really sharpen themselves as a first team, as a horizontal first team, to hold each other accountable for their behavior, to hold each other accountable for their principles before and then they influence that downward in their organizations. So the advantage talks a lot about creating a cohesive, accountable, integrated, aligned first team, and that will generate some of that alignment in the organization we talk about. And again, decide what you're going to tolerate and what you're not going to tolerate. Then let's walk out and be consistent with our behavior on that. The final pattern I want to bring up, and it's aligned. It really aligns with what we were talking about with the toleration gap, is walk your talk. Words are cheap. I was just talking to someone about this yesterday, and we were talking about leaders, and leaders have lots of words, and it's not that words are good or bad, but they're cheap. I think they're easy to say. It's much more difficult and much more challenging to walk your talk. So words are great. Behavior trumps. So actions trump words. Showing trumps telling. Showing people what it looks like. By you demonstrating it in your day-to-day behavior. Like trust. Don't say I trust you. Show someone that you trust them. Show someone that you're going to tolerate something or you're not going to tolerate something. Be consistent. Modeling, Trump saying, role modeling the behavior. You want to create a culture where failure is encouraged, where people feel that it's safe to try new things and to experiment. Well, then model failure yourself. Talk about your failure. Show vulnerability. Modeling Trump's saying that it's okay to fail. Consistency trumps randomness. Talking about that's safe to fail and modeling it consistently versus not. It undermines it. And then values trump everything. Your values. Are you walking out on your values? How do your personal values align with the Agile principles and values? So how do you shape your culture? In everything you do. You're shaping it no matter if you're listening to this talk or not listening to this talk. Every day as a leader, people are watching what you do. They listen to you. They watch your model. They watch your decisions. They watch how you make decisions, how you hold people accountable, how you not hold people accountable. Whatever you do, you are shaping the culture. What I'm talking about here is be more intentional, be more conscious of it from an agile mindset, from an agile cultural shift perspective. Say what you mean what you say, and let your words and actions align and match. Most of the time, we're not perfect, we're not omnipotent, we're going to make mistakes. But are you leaning into that? Are you leaning into your culture shaping responsibilities as a leader? A final thought for the talk is a lot of times folks will refute, maybe react not badly to this talk, but it's like, this sounds all great, but I can't do this stuff. Well, it might be that your cup is full, that your assumptions are full, that you have too much on your plate. So before you move out and you discount everything we've talked about, maybe empty your cup. Maybe clear some space in your assumptions, your baggage, your historical views. You may need to like lessen the load, at least temporarily, and then fill it with some new ideas. It's really hard to adopt and change if you don't lessen, empty your cup a little bit. And just like I had to get Yoda in, it's always good in a talk like this to bring a Bruce Lee quote in. So emptying, that notion of emptying your cup can be really useful for me, because we all have baggage and it's really hard to change if we don't remove something. So I invite you to remove something before you consider adding or changing. With that, I'm done. I have an article there that I'm posted. You can go to that article. It's a 5-part series on leadership, sort of ideas around leader culture shaping. It's probably a broader brush view. It aligns with this talk really nicely, but it provides a lot more details and some stories and things like that. So it might be worth your while to read that 5-part article series. And with that, I just want to thank Susan, and I want to thank everyone for inviting me, and I want to thank you for participating.
We thank you very much, Bob, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan. Bye-bye now.